see your mother. You were only given one, go see your mother. And you know that you will never have another. Go see your mother. Go see your mom.
Welcome to Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. I'm your host, Sadia. This is my mother, Ima. Hey, Ima.
Hello.
So originally I wanted to talk about, this was a while ago, I sent you a video of a school from 1968, and they were showing the teachers and how they taught, how they expressed themselves, and how they were trying to help shape the minds of these young kids. And when I was watching it, a lot of the teachers kind of had this my way or the highway like attitude
Yes.
that
That's
didn't
yes.
that didn't really allow like a freedom of thought or expression. And I kind of watching that video made me really understand why the boomer generation, went so hard on rebelling against the system.
Yes.
Because it was so restrictive and it was suffocating almost, like just by like this one teacher was explaining how this was an odd one. This was talking about whether it'd be okay if they I think it was if the students went to would they allow a black fraternity in their school or something like that. And a lot of kids were okay with it, but some were not. And they were like, yeah, no, that's fine. They were like saying different statements that, obviously didn't age well. But I guess to wrap up this whole thesis statement in the beginning of the podcast is, how teaching has changed and attitudes have changed almost to the opposite extreme of today, where there's almost no rules and no restraints on some level, and you have to be this avant-garde, open-minded person. And if you have any restrictions on yourself or that you want to express, it's penalized nowadays.
It depends. Like, well, obviously on the university campuses, we see this going on, where the those students that are more of the conservative bent are really criticized and put down. Whereas your socialistic, communistic ideas. And by the way, that wasn't too much different by the time when I was going to campus. It was the same thing. The socialistic and communistic ideas were really pushed. But the difference was that we did have free dialogue. We had some professors that were more of the conservative bent that took issue with that. And they were permitted a forum. They were permitted to come and speak, and they were listened to respectfully. And there was free debate. I mean, the general milieu of the campus was more communistic, leftist, whatever, socialistic, but we weren't violent. We didn't shut down anybody that was of a different opinion. We gave them a forum. We listened to them. I think I mentioned this before. The biggest criticism, though, I had of the on-campus student group for conservative thought was called Young Americans for Freedom. And I remember dialoguing with them. And I remember one time they were invited to a debate about the Vietnam War at the time. And this would have been a fantastic opportunity for these conservative students to come and really express detail by detail with actual facts, their point of view. And maybe people like myself who are more in the middle would have been more won over. The problem was they got emotional. They brought in a speaker who was a total idiot, which I can't understand, because there were plenty of very high intellectual conservative thinkers that we had on campus among our faculty that they could have invited to speak at this debate, and it would have been very excellent. But no, instead they chose this idiot who was he was one of the many people running for Congress, and he didn't know what he was doing. He didn't know what he was talking about. His facts were totally flawed. Also, when I spoke to some of these students that were part of this group, they weren't giving me real, concrete facts. They were coming from a total emotional point of view. Like this one girl who belonged to the group, we were debating about Nixon's what Nixon was doing with the war in Vietnam, that we should cut it off, we should just leave. It's not either win it or leave it. And at that point the United States wasn't doing anything to really win this war. In fact, it wasn't even a declared war. It was called a police action. So this girl says to me, so I was criticizing Nixon for continuing the so-called police action, using lives, using resources for something that had no real ending. And she says to me, well, President Nixon is our leader and we need to follow him. I go, what? Yeah, I mean, why? Get the idea. Totally.
Yeah.
She had an opportunity perhaps to show me a more conservative point of view, going step by step with concrete facts, and she didn't. Now, when I was teaching Hebrew school, there was a girl who was in a gifted program, the program for gifted students at City College, which I thought was very interesting because my father went to City College. City College was a boys' school, and this is in the 1980s now in Baltimore City, and now City College was a co-ed school, and they had, as a matter of fact, they had a gifted and intellectual curriculum for those students who were like very high up academically. So she wanted to interview me about my points of view of different things. And so when I gave her the conservative point of view, like how I felt about government, the role of government, and I said, the best system, and history has proved this out, is a basically competitive capitalistic system with, you might say, a little bit of socialism for, I mean, we can't let poor people starve, if there's a social problem, there are certain things like education that the government, needs to be minimally involved in, needs to support. I said, but the role of government should be that the competitive market is truly competitive in a very fair way, that there's no price gouging, there's no racketeering, like, companies getting together and saying, we're all going to raise our prices together, therefore the market's not going to be competitive and everyone's going to be forced to pay this higher price. So no, the government has to be basically a watchdog to make sure that the competitive market is truly and fairly competitive. And she was like, wow, she was very impressed with this. Now that's an example of giving a conservative point of view in a very factual, logical way. And unfortunately, the conservatives at my time, it was really sad. They didn't. They had the great opportunity to do that, and they didn't. This one Hungarian student I spoke to, who was a member of this group, told me, though, a very interesting story of what it was like when he was in Hungary and the communists came in, the Russian communists came in. He said they immediately removed all the elected officials from the local government and replaced them basically with criminals, with convicted criminals to run the community. And he said, and it was at that point that he and his family decided to immigrate from Hungary to the United States. And he told me how disastrous it was, how the economy just totally fell apart, how the infrastructure in the economy and all the, water, electric, just everything just totally fell apart as a result.
I have a question. I wonder if you could do this thought experiment. Can you put yourself into the conservative shoes in the 1970s when you were in college, and how would you bring up a more conservative Republican perspective of why you should stay in Vietnam?
Well, actually, by that point, not that we should stay in Vietnam, but we cannot fight a war with one arm tied behind our back, which was what we were trying to do. First of all, us getting involved was very questionable because at the time, it wasn't like the United States was really being, like World War II, the United States was attacked. We were mamish attacked. And had we not gotten involved in World War II, like this is saying, if the United States had not gotten involved in World War II, chances are most likely your grandmother would have been a lampshade.
Yeah.
I've heard conservative people say that. The problem with Vietnam was that our goals were very nebulous, and the way that you fight any type of war is you come in with a very concrete strategy. An army is not built to be stagnant, to hold their position. Holding your position in a war is a recipe for disaster, as history has proven over and over again. An army either needs to advance or retreat. Do one or the other. But to sit and hold your position is going to make you a sitting duck. And that's what we were doing in Vietnam. We would start to win, and then all of a sudden the army would be told, the generals would be told by the government, hold your position, don't go any further. The way to win a war is you advance, and you advance until you would meet your goal. You keep going. Once you meet your goal, then you have to have an exit strategy. We had none of that. It was total disaster. And I think had the United States done that in a very timely fashion, there would not have been the protests that there were. The problem was, like, first of all, we had a draft. So I heard this one young man at the kitchen table arguing with his father, and he said that his problem with the Vietnam War, he says, these politicians are playing chess with our lives. And that's exactly what was happening. The government of South Vietnam was run by this horrible dictatorship, the Diem regime, which, people were looking at it and say, which is worse? The communists that are coming in, that are dictators, that you had this dictatorship under Ho Chi Minh, or the Southern, government, which is also a bloody dictatorship that's being run by the Diem regime. So it's like, so I once at an anti-Vietnam rally, I heard a serviceman who had served in Vietnam, who was giving a speech against the war based on things he had experienced there. And he said when he first got to Vietnam, he saw this big, big Coca-Cola sign. And at first he felt good. Oh boy, a little bit of home. And then he says, after a few months of trying to fight this ridiculous war, or so-called war, because it really wasn't, it was a police action, he said he wondered, is that there because we're here, or are we here because that's there?
Wow. I mean, one of the other points, and it kind of correlates to Afghanistan that's been brought up, is that you can't fight an idea with people that are living there that want to fight against you, and it's their home team advantage. It's not like World War II, where you had all these countries trying to just force another country. It's not a Western war. And I think that's where the Vietnam War, war in Iraq, war in Afghanistan all failed, was because it was a Western civilization trying to fight a Western war in an Eastern world.
Yeah.
And what's funny is, and kind of correlating to the war in Israel, is that's where a lot of these Arab countries get it wrong, where they think Israel is a Western country, and they're just gonna fall out, and they're just gonna give up. They're just gonna go ahead and leave, just like France, America, Russia, etc. They don't understand that Jews are Middle Eastern at heart. Jews are from Israel. So this isn't a Western versus Eastern. This is a Jewish versus everyone else, in a situation where it's like, this is our homeland. We have home team advantage. You do not. You were the invaders. We were not. And it's just like,
Yeah.
it's the fact that they don't understand that. And that's why they keep on losing all the wars from the 48 to 67, 73, all these intifadas, everything else. They've just been failing because they're not understanding that this isn't a Western civilization. The Jewish culture in Israel is not Western civilization. Yes, there's Ashkenazi Jews, but that doesn't matter because we were all Jews coming from Israel. So they just don't get it. So they believe their own lies and they make their own mistakes and cause their own problems and then lose every single, excursion that they can imagine. And that's why it's just like I'm morbidly, just confident that like no matter how hard they try or how much they hit, we're just gonna just stand our ground and they're never gonna win because of that.
Like I said, God's on our side, and the Torah is very, very clear that Israel is homeland of the Jews. And if you really want to take it from a practical historical point of view, go back further and further and further. You read in the book called The Living Torah how the children of Shem, who was the predecessor of the Jewish people. Jewish people, we are descended from Shem. That his children, after the Mabul and everything was all cleared and the earth was pretty dry and settled in Israel. And many places such as Ashkelon are named after the children of Shem. And then the Canaanites were the ones that came over and forcibly stole the land from the children of Shem. So very technically, the Jewish people who were, the predecessors were the children of Shem, had the land from the very inception.
Well, it's also this thing of like that even that argument, because what's been happening is today's society, Jews are going to be whatever is demonized. So colonizing is demonized, so Jews are the colonizers. And then people are finding out and realizing this point that you just made, where it's just like everyone colonized everything. It's called war and the spoils of war and winning war. Like it's how this world was fought since day one. Like you can't go ahead and get mad at the rule book because you keep on losing. Like you're trying to go ahead, like they talk about in America where it's just like, well, it belonged to the Indians. They're like, okay, so the Native Americans, which Native Americans conquered which Native Americans, which conquered which Native Americans, which conquered which Native Americans.
Yeah.
Which so it's just like, it's a conquering system. You can't, you're just trying to demonize because of your white guilt. And that's the other problem. Forcing guilt on people is never productive. That's why I never believe in Jewish guilt to the non-Jewish world, because they just don't cop it and it's not worth it. Because just guilt eventually just eats away and the other person just attacks and says, I don't care anymore. I don't care if I'm guilty. And I think that's what's happening today as well, where people are just getting done feeling guilty, and it's this whole massive, movement of no longer feeling guilty of who they are.
You go through this history, whatever. All right, so here is where we are now. Okay, where do we go from here? What are you going to do? As a matter of fact, there was when I was in high school, this black congressman, I forgot who it was, came and spoke at our high school. And he addressed that mentality of, if you don't, of who the original Americans were, and if you don't like the way the country is, why don't you just leave? So he says, okay, so I'll tell you what then. All the Italians go back to Italy. All the Russians go back to all that. And he went through all the different ethnic groups. He says, and all the black people go back to Africa, and we take the whole country and turn it back over to the Indians. How do you think about that? And everybody started, applauding. Like he was, he was so right. I think it was Clarence Thomas. Darn, I forgot the guy's name. I forgot this congressman's name that spoke at our school. But okay, but that's the point. So, okay, we can't rewind history. So where do we go from here? Like you said, stop the guilt. Same is true with children and parent relationships. They went through, I remember in the 90s, the talk show psychologists were very, very big. It was very big, very popular. And so you had a lot of people calling these talk show psychologists about their parents did this, their parents did that, their parents that, Everybody's reminiscing about the horrible childhoods they had, and all the horrible experience, bad things that happened with them and their parents. So this one psychologist finally, after her audience for months going on, she says, you know what? Finally, she got a call from some parents. And they said, okay, they said, our kids are mad at us now. We did this wrong. We did that wrong. We feel horrible. How can we handle this? We want to have a relationship with our kids. And they're mad at us. They don't want to have a relationship with us. So the psychologist said to them, look, say to your kids, we're really sorry that we goofed up in these areas, but we can't go back. We can't rewind the past. But what would you like us to do for you now? And I think that was really good advice. What would you like us to do for you now?
Yeah, but I think also at some point you can't, because as like anybody in their early 20s gets that moment of, anger and resentment from their parents and saying they could have done better. Mm-hmm. But like once you mature from that, you realize like they did their best with what they had. You do the best with what you have. You just forgive and you move on. That's all you can do. There's no point of having these conversations of trying to, like, what can you please go back in time and not do that? Like, no, you just have to, okay, I'm sorry this happened. I'm sorry I did this to you. What can I do to make it better? Normally people go like, honestly, now that you said that, I don't really care. I just wanted to hear that. I think that's really what it is. I think you just want the parent to admit.
Car would make me feel better.
Don't get your hopes
$1 million might cure my psychosis.
Well,
my psychiatrist says the only hope for my recovery is a new car and $1 million.
So Ema, what's funny you say that. I'm working on your next story, and I'm going through it and editing it and whatnot. One of the parts of the story kind of, I hate saying this word because it sounds so silly. It kind of triggered me in remembering when I was a kid, what you would tell me when I was like getting into fights with my siblings and things like that, where you do this thing of like, oh, just ignore it, just smile and wave and just laugh and it's just gonna go away. And I thought to myself, like, what a terrible piece of advice you gave me. And I still think it's a terrible idea.
Well, what would have been better for you to beat the pulp out of them and knock out some of their teeth, and I have to pay a dentist bill, which would have been better.
A price to pay to make them stop.
What happened to you, actually?
Yeah, no, that wasn't. No, that was because we were play fighting. We were wrestling, and my little brother grabbed my feet because he asked for a free shot. So he grabbed my feet and my head went.
Think about the time and money I spent just repairing teeth, sewing you kids up, taking you to doctors to reset your bones.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of which, my son today had a funny little story. He was in the living room. I was in the dining room taking care of a few things, cleaning up, whatever. It's early in the morning, so he's just wearing his pajamas. All of a sudden, I hear a rip. And then my son goes, poopy, poopy. I'm like, what? Took off his pajamas, took off his diaper that was filled with poop. And then it was on the floor. And then he was walking around saying poopy, poopy, because he's starting to learn now how to recognize when he needs to use the bathroom. So we're like, okay, let's go to the bathroom. And I have to I got poop on my hands. I had to wash everything off, clean everything out. It was like, oh my God. But it was just another one of the funny multiple stories, God willing, of just kids growing up.
One time I was at a gas station and this woman's kids got a hold of a hose, hose for washing the cars, and started, before she could stop them, they started waving it around, and I got spritzed a little, and she was horrified. And she said, I'm so sorry. And so I said, that's okay. I said, as a mother of a large family, every noxious form of human liquid and substance has been dumped on me. I said, this water is nothing.
Yeah. It's kind of this point where I'm just getting into that phase, and I don't know, I find it entertaining.
Just keep your disinfectant cleaner at close range. And your antibacterial soap too.
We have antibacterial, and we also have what's it called? We have this pet odor spray we've been
Oh
using to
yeah,
get rid of all the
seen that.
smells of all
Yeah.
the poop that's
I
been
mean,
happening.
when I think back to, when like now we have, thank God, we're in an age where there's good sanitation, we have toilets, we have running water. But I think back sometimes to parents, like say like about before the 20th century, or even some people, even into like the middle part of the 20th century, there were areas that did not have running water, did not have good sanitation. And I think, raising children, especially, you know, little toddlers that you're doing toilet training with, I said, my God, how did they manage? I guess they had soap. I guess they had, they had cleaners and soap, but like outhouses instead of toilet, running to the well or running to the pumping to the pump and pumping the water out of the pump. And gosh, can you imagine the challenges those
What
people
what
had?
I experience is the closest thing I can experience is like when I'm at work and it's 30 degrees
Mhm.
outside and I have to use the porta potty and it's like cold, cold. So I'm thinking, wow, like this is just me now at work for this moment. Like I
Yeah.
can't imagine like back in the 1800s when it's the middle of the night, you got to use the bathroom. You got to get up, walk outside in the freezing
Mhm.
cold and wherever and use the facilities. And it was just brutal.
I met a woman actually at our show who, well, she's a little older than I am. And she lived in a part of the United States actually where, she said they did not have, um, plumbing or running water, and they had an outhouse. And this is like 1950, 1950. And I said, how did you manage to, like, in the dead of the winter, having to go out to the out? She goes, we didn't think about it. She said, we just did it.
I think that's very
Yeah.
true because I think of like when I was there's a joke today where kids nowadays ask like adults like how did you manage to write an entire essay, with no chat GPT prompt to like and you had to write all these essays for school and all you had was 45 minutes to write it. Like what did you do? And they're like we had to write it by hand as well,
That's right.
and it's just like you just don't think about it. It's not that like it's the work that has to get done.
Well,
Like I
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I was going to talk like
Mhm.
the concept of going to the library and doing research by looking and reading books. Like I go back to that all the time, where it's just like what took me so long in fourth grade. I had to do a report on like sharks or report on tsunamis, and I had to read books, highlight what I wanted, like write it verbatim, and then quote it properly, and then do all this stuff
Mhm.
like I remember doing it and thinking it's taking me forever and it probably took me about a week but it was still something that like I had to grind to do that like nowadays in like a
Mhm.
millisecond it could be done better than I could ever imagine.
Well, we did true research papers. We spent days in the library, and I remember coming home with stacks of books when I was doing this one big research paper. I think I had in high school or college. In fact, what happened was funny incident. I had all these books, and I would go through the books, and you took the index cards. You took these cards, and you wrote down the facts on these cards. These were your research cards. You spent, literally days, if not weeks, just on the research. By the time you finished the research, writing the paper was nothing. You just went right. You could go right through because you made an outline. You had your research cards there. You made an outline of your main ideas and the, facts that you were going to use to support them. And after you did the outline, the actual writing was very, very quick. So anyway, as I was using these books, I would just take them and throw them on my bed. I had a desk. I had two beds, bed, desk. Then there was a bed. I had two beds in my room because by that time my sister Ann had gotten married, moved out of the house, whatever. So anyway, so I'm throwing all these books on my bed as I'm writing down my note cards, looking up these books. But by the time I finished, it was really late at night. It was like had to be like 1 o'clock in the morning or something. And all these books were just spread out among my bed. And I thought, I'm just going to sleep on the other bed. So I slept on the other bed that was on the other side of the room. Well, Aunt Judy, what happened was I used to play pranks on Aunt Judy. So on this particular night, she decided she's going to get me back. So I'm laying there in bed. I'm almost asleep. It must be 1 o'clock, 1:30 something. My door opens and I hear Aunt Judy go, "Oh, Charlene." And I go, "Huh?" All of a sudden I hear her yell, "Bonsai!" I hear this big crash. I open up my light and the bed was collapsed. And she's in the middle of all these books with this puzzled expression on her face. She thought she was going to jump on me. And she didn't know, of course, in the dark that all these books were on the bed. And she jumped on these books on the bed and everything collapses and she's in the middle of it.
I love it how that's like your favorite story about your sister and pranks. We've mentioned it. We've mentioned that story like at least 3-4 times
I'm getting
on
old.
this TV show.
I'm starting to forget.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I get it.
Oh, I want to switch topics just a little bit because I wanted to talk about Brucha Getz's book, Let's Stay Pure.
Oh God,
Yeah.
the terrible title.
Yeah, but the thing is this: I would recommend it. It's an excellently well written book. It is so good. It's directed to children about being careful about the media and the information you're exposed to, which is and she puts it on a child's level, which is, she writes it excellently. And like you just said, the only thing I found very disappointing about at that book was the title that she picked. And remember, we were going through the book, and at the end of the book, she says, let's take care of our special neshama. I thought that would have been a much more positive, excellent title for that book, Our Special Neshama, rather than Let's Stay Pure. I don't know what it is, but Let's Stay Pure has like a
weird connotation.
It's like a negative connotation, like a yeah.
In Western society, the concept of the word pure has unfortunately been tainted. It's kind of funny because it on some level it reminds me of why the Ketores was never found out and why the real Ketores smell was taken away. And one of the reasons why they say that is because if it was found out and utilized by the wrong people, it would destroy and ruin the smell of the Ketores.
Interesting.
So like I understand that now because there's a lot of words in the English vernacular that like used to be one thing and now it's just taken a negative way. But adding to that, the frustration I've seen in the Frum community where there needs to be some secular HR person to really go through, and I think we've talked about this part before as well, really go through the phrases, images, advertisements, whatever you name it, that the Frum community wants to produce, because there's a lot of times they do things and it's just like it just comes off weird, or if you're not understanding it, it could be taken the wrong way. Like there's this fundraiser by URA, which is a program to help people that are becoming religious, just get settled. And the problem is that the mascot is a $5 bill called Five-ish. Yeah, it's because the logic is you're doing a fundraiser. So what's important on a fundraiser? Money. So the mascot should be money. And it's a $5 bill, and it's a joke because his name is Five-ish, like a Jewish name. Sure, that's tops. It's very smart. That's great. But then the internet gets a hold of it and finds a video of all these little Jewish kids with long payas and yarmulkes chasing after a $5 bill. That could be a whole issue. And it has been because I saw it online and I saw the comments and they were not fun. And so it's just like a lot of these from like companies need to take an evaluation of themselves and ask themselves, like, does this age well, or is this appropriate for today's standards? There's another old joke that's been going around is, certain magazines don't allow women on their magazines. So what they do for advertisements is they use men. So there's an advertisement for a Hanukkah, like menorahs and whatnot. So it showed two Hasidic men playing dreidel with a little boy. And just the way it was framed and the way they're being sat down and sitting playing dreidel, it looks like a Jewish gay couple with their son. So
Oh,
again, you need to stop and evaluate. Like, there's definitely like, okay, this is more pulling at straws here, but there's like a camp here called Camp Spitz. And there's another one was Camp
you gotta be
Spunk
kidding me.
and Camp Double D and all these little camps that
Oh,
they
yeah.
make. And it's just like, wow, you really weren't
Oh,
thinking on
don't
that
say-
one.
We shouldn't stop it because our community needs a good laughing stock occasionally.
I mean, yeah,
but
I
if
guess.
you do that, you're taking away all the humor from our mundane lives.
I understand. I don't know.
I know
It-
it's like there's this kid in the daycare who this kid is hell on earth to deal with, and so his mother asked me how he was doing. So I said, let's put it this way: no class is complete without a child like yours. She cracks and looks at me. She goes, because I take it that's not exactly a compliment.
Yeah, but that's a topic for another day, talking about schools and the school system. But yeah, I mean, looking back in conclusion of our podcast for the day, like, I think what it is that people really need to take a step back, and it's okay to just reevaluate what you've done so you could have a better like future, and don't take it too offensively. Just try to move forward and not get like all angry.
Sounds good, man. So in a way, that's what I think that the Lubavitch Rebbe did when he first took over. He wanted them to come out with like a magazine for children, and when they showed the artist showed the Lubavitch Rebbe there with proof or whatever, the proofs, he rejected them. He said, "Why?" He says, "No girls." He says, "I want you to put girls in these magazines. It's very important that we include girls." And I just think not including, I mean, to each his own, this is their sheet, fine. But something, my mother had a saying, she goes, there's from and there's verfromd. And to go to the extent of not having illustrations of girls, not having illustrations of, women, okay, you're going beyond the Torah's dictates. That's, that's verfromd already, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, again, and we could talk about this next time, but I was having a conversation with someone on Shabbos about there's a shidduch crisis everyone's talking about. But what's funny is
there has been a shidduch crisis since the beginning of creation.
So that's what I was basically going to tell him. I waited for him to finish talking, and he confirmed what I was saying, was that there really isn't a shidduch dating crisis. There's just men and women that just are being picky and choosy, or their parents are being picky and choosy, or the shadchan's being picky and choosy. But statistically, there is one man, one woman. Like there is like people available. It's just the way the system's been messed up. Like at this point nowadays, there some shidduch dating, they don't allow the man and woman to call each other. They only have the contact through the shadchan. They don't call each other. They don't exchange phone numbers, which is kind of odd because like you're about to whatever. But we can talk about it next week. But yeah, so I figured I'd let you know. All right, I love you, Ima. Have a great week.
Have a great week, honey. I love you. Bye-bye.
That's another episode of Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. Thanks for listening to us kvetch, reminisce, and of course, get a little motherly advice along the way. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share with your favorite Jewish mother or anyone who needs a little guilt in their life. Got a story, question, or just want to say hi? Send us a message. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, call your mother. She worries.